Welcome to the podcast Selling Real Estate with Kelly Cook, where we will discuss the latest and most relevant business strategies to help you do one thing extremely well: sell more homes. We'll discuss everything from business planning to lead generation and conversion to past client customer service and everything in between. Join us for authentic conversations and nuts and bolts takeaways you can implement into your business today. And now, Selling Real Estate with Kelly Cook.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. It is another episode of Selling Real Estate with Kelly Cook, and we do have Kelly Cook here today with us on this podcast. Kelly, I have a question for you, and you're going to have to think way back in the back of your mind. Do you remember the first listing you ever took?
Oh, the first listing. Oh, man. I remember the first, that sounds bad. I remember the first buyer I got under contract. I remember that.
Okay.
Remember his name, Scott. First house to sell. I remember one of the early on ones. Yes, I do. I don't know if it's the first one. I gotta be honest with you though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at this point, you just done so many. So
18 years, man. I have a hard time remember I did 18 minutes ago, let alone 18 years ago, right?
But you do remember the first buyer you ever.
Yes.
So if your first real deal.
First real deal. I remember it was in Goodyear, Arizona. It was 2005, May of 2005. And I mean, literally, what's that? 18 years ago.
So we're on your anniversary. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember he gave me a call. He called off of a ad a lender was running on my behalf because they're trying to partner with us, right, on some stuff, right? And I didn't have any money to do marketing back then. I was brand new, and I just got done, coaching college football. Moved here from Mississippi at Ole Miss, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I was doing at all, right? Mm-hmm. And this lender I got in touch with just said, "Hey, I'll throw you on here. We'll do some co-marketing, and if they want to buy a house and get lending for the property, maybe you can mention my name." Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, sounds good to me. Sure, I'll just do whatever, right? So it was a magazine, one of these deals where you get to call a line that was 888
mm-hmm.
number, like a voice box. No one's on the line to pick up. And it would just give a recording of this house is 3 bedrooms, 2 bath, and it's 1,426 square feet, and that sort of thing. And someone called, and so and then they can press 1 if they want more information, and they did it. And it was literally on a Tuesday night. Never get it. Tuesday night at 10:23 p.m.
Oh my gosh! You remember the day? You remember the time? Wow!
That I'll never forget. and because I tell a story a decent amount, I probably should share it more often. But I haven't. But I remember I picked the phone up at 10:23 p.m. I didn't know who it was. I was hoping maybe it could be business, but not too many people call me that late, mm-hmm. unless it's hey, let's go out and hang out or something, right? Because mm-hmm. At the time I'm 24 or 23.
Yeah.
And so I picked the phone up, and sure enough, it was Scott Scalera. Never forget it. And he asked a question about the house. I'm sitting there trying to, I'm stumbling over my words, trying to figure out don't mess this up. And yeah, can I go see this house tomorrow? And I said, yeah. What he could have said anytime. Yes, I'm there. Mm-hmm. And so we went and we saw it the next day, as well as a couple other ones I was able to find for him too. And he ended up buying, 3 days later, went back there again multiple times and ended up buying one of those houses. And it was a great experience. He's a great guy. And I just remember, then fast forward about 30 days, I remember getting the first check.
And, yeah. That's what I was going to ask you about next. How'd that
be? I remember it was like $4,900 and some dollars. And I mean, I can't stress this enough. I know it's a cliche and you probably expect me to say this, but I mean, I remember this like it was yesterday, this part, just sitting there staring at it. And I couldn't believe, I thought you would have thought I just won the Powerball. Mm-hmm. The Powerball, the lottery, knowing how I grew up and where I came from. I mean, that's like a
lot of money all at once.
That's a third. Yeah. Yeah. It's like a third of what my father made in some years, and I just didn't know. I'm sitting there going, what in the world? I've never seen a check that big. And I was, like I said, 25 or something like that. And I remember I stared at it for it had to be at least 5 to 6 seconds, but it felt like it was a minute, going, I just can't and I'm going to be able to go to the bank and put this, this is I own, this is mine. And I don't know. It was the coolest thing ever. And of course, from someone who's, a high D, I'm a driver. Then I was just like motivated. Now I'm sitting there,
Hooked.
okay, now I'm hooked. Now this is unbelievable. This could change like my life from a financial standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? I'm in control of it. Like I
Mm-hmm.
can choose to work 7 days a week, 90 hours a week if I want to, because that's what I was doing when I was coaching college football. So that's no big
Mm-hmm.
deal. And
And
if
change
I,
your money with it, because when you're
yes,
coaching, you could you could be working that much, but it stays the same.
stays the
So
same.
yeah,
And then by the way, if you don't win enough games, they can just fire you for it. And you
yeah,
don't have any say in that either, And so it's just, so anyways, I just, that's a great question, Elizabeth. And I wish I had the listing down, but I had the buyer like
that's
very clear, because that was my
okay.
first ever deal.
Yeah, and for most people it is, which leads us into our topic today, actually. So like we were just kind of talking about here, most agents when they get going, probably their first deal is usually not going to be a listing. I mean, there are some, I'm sure that there are a few where the first day you cold call and you pick up a listing right away and that's your first deal. And that's awesome. But for most agents, they're starting off as buyer's agents, right? Might be
Right.
as a working on a team and you're a showing assistant and you're kind of going in, then you're getting your own buyers and that sort of thing. You're getting the buyer leads, right? The Zillow leads, the things that are coming in from there. It takes a while for most people to really kind of get more listings, and it takes even longer a lot of the time to flip your business from being mostly buyers to mostly listings, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
today we want to talk a little bit about how to do that, kind of at how do you start the transition from being a primarily buyer's agent to being primarily a listing agent,
Yeah.
or to start really marketing yourself as somebody who can sell a house instead of just helping you buy. So let's get into it, Kelly. How
Yeah.
did you? So you remember your very first buy side check that you got. You don't remember
Right.
the listing one, which was probably a little bit more money, but that's okay. It wasn't as impactful as that first one. It was that first taste of freedom, right?
Yeah.
So, how long did you work with buyers, or at what, like, when you started your business, were you primarily working with buyers from then
Yeah,
on?
so let's give some framework around that real quick. That's a great question, Elizabeth. I first of all, teams weren't really a thing. If they were, I didn't know about it. It wasn't common enough to even know that the several brokers I went to talk about joining
Mm-hmm.
their company even mentioned it, right? So it wasn't really a thing. This is 2005, and I just was willing to work hard. I was single. I didn't have any kids, obviously, and I just was ready to rock and roll. Just looking for. I was always been a hard worker, and which, by the way, didn't necessarily help. It helped me in many, many ways in this career. But when you started getting that trajectory going, you got about midway through, and then just working hard won't get you so far. Then you have to start working smarter a little bit too, right? And getting
Got to be
coaching
efficient.
and
Mm-hmm.
efficiencies and all that stuff that you got to put in your business. Well, that's a whole other topic, but that took me a while to figure all that out. I was just putting my head down and rolling, right? And that's one thing I knew I could control. I could control my time, how hard I worked, and I was going to outwork everybody possibly that's out there. That was my mentality. So to your point, if someone said jump, I literally said how high.
Mm-hmm.
Drive 50 miles away here to Buckeye to give me a Diet Coke. I would said, okay, as long as that I knew that was a means to an end
Yeah.
of some sort of maybe deal in the future, right?
The
I would have done
hustle
it.
culture. Yeah.
No problem. Yeah, I'm in. I wouldn't even think about the gas. I know it's going to come at some point. I would just go. Forget the gas mileage. If I had money in the bank, which I didn't at that time, so I just hustled. So I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have. There was no coaching at this local brokerage I was at the time that ended up going bankrupt when the market crashed in 2008. I just did whatever. Rentals, you name it. Right? That's where I really got my start. So, but nonetheless, I did start working with buyers primarily. Absolutely. It just kind of is the natural progression for whatever reason. That's what it is. There's a little bit more of a art and a skill that needs to be learned when it comes to working with sellers.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why that is. I think it's because the sellers are paying the fee for their representation of the seller's agent as well as the buyer's agent. So maybe because the buyer client isn't paying, like writing a check like directly the buyer's agent, maybe that's why a lot of agents feel more comfortable staying there until they get a little bit more experience. That's
Mm-hmm.
probably what it is overall. But nonetheless, that is the way it works.
The other thing too that I just want to mention, because I think that I think that this plays into it a little bit, and I could be wrong, but for the most part, I feel like buyers are more interested in the house they want to buy, right? What kind of house can I get? They don't really care about the agent that can show them where those houses. It's the relationship aspect of it is not as important. Their goal is the house. I want to look at the house. Whereas sellers, they're selling something that's really important to them. They want to work with somebody that they can trust. And I
Yeah.
think that it takes a little bit more time and skill to build that trust. And so that might be a little bit too why a lot of people get started on buyers, because buyers just care less about who they're working with, to be honest.
To
Like
an extent.
I think,
Yeah. I
yeah,
agree with
to an
that.
extent, a
Yeah.
little bit
Overall.
less than a seller who's actually, yeah, putting their money in there, entrusting somebody with one of the biggest sells that they're going to have in their life,
Yeah, and until you experience as a buyer, but until you experience the difference between a licensee that is not very good or inexperienced and a licensee that is very experienced and good, then you don't know the difference. And so you're just going to
Mhm.
go with the least
Right.
common denominator, right? Which is a real
Mhm.
estate license. And now give me the
Mhm.
house. But
Yep.
until you have that experience, I firmly believe there's a huge difference. And sometimes if you're one of those agents that has it figured out for whatever reason, maybe you got coaching or you're on a team, whatever, and you are very efficient, very good, and you have a lot of customer service skills, and really care and do a job for your client. Sometimes you don't know that that's not the norm in the industry.
Mhm.
It's not. And that most people just fly by seat of the pants and they don't do a great job, a quote unquote, great job for the buyer. And that's the experience most of the time the buyer gets out there. So the buyer just says, "Hey, if you have a license and you have a license, you must be the
It's the
same. So I'll
same.
just go with
Mhm.
I go with whoever is the person who's available first, or whatever it is, right?" Or
Mhm.
I would say cheapest, but on the buy side, that's not necessarily the case. So I think that a lot of that has to play in with that fact. Now, if you are working with buyers, because again, that's a natural progression here, and you're probably starting off doing that, you want to get transitioned over to a listing agent. There are multiple things you can do, and there's no right or wrong answer necessarily. But I will say this, and I will say this, and so if you get nothing out of this podcast, please hear this next, and that is, it should not be a or, it should be an and. So if you're working with buyers, which you probably are, and you want to transition, you need to keep that buyer business going as much as you possibly can. Well, Kelly, how can I do that if I'm trying to really focus on, lead generation for listings and working with sellers? Well, you may have to leverage yourself. Now, if you're on a team, that may be easier to do because you should have some leverage pieces already built in. And that's why the reason why you're maybe paying a split to and a fee to your team for those resources, et cetera, and systems, hopefully. But if you're not, or you are, either way, you need to try to find another individual who's licensed, who shares your same values, and represents you well, who can show properties on your behalf. That's very important. If they can show properties on your behalf, then that is what takes the most time. And arguably, it's not the most skill based issue or aspect of the transaction life cycle. Right. So if you can find someone to, help a client open doors. Now, what do you just say on the phone? Hey, I'm sending Jimmy over there tomorrow at 2:00. No, you should sit them down face to face, maybe on a Zoom, and say, okay, here's how we do business at this XYZ team. And the team could be just you by yourself and you're showing an assistant or showing an agent, right? But whatever it is. And you say, this is what we do, and you go through all the value adds of what you get by working with this process. Because there's a lot of things you can do really well and a lot of things you can screw up. And until that happens, until something gets screwed up, the buyer may not even know those things exist. But when they do, they're big black marks and it's not good. So you go through all those things. And here's the process. And here's what we do. And that being said, I'm going to have Jimmy over here. He's going to meet you tomorrow at 2:00 to show you these 5 houses, whatever it is. And I will be talking to Jimmy multiple times every single day. I'll be quarterbacking this transaction from start to finish, X, Y to Z. And where I really thrive on your behalf is negotiating the relationships with the other agents, because it's really a small knit community when it comes down to, I don't care how big the city is, of agents who really do a lot of business. And
Mhm.
so I've been doing this 18 years. I have a lot of good relationships with these agents. And so that's where I come into play. And deal structure. How do we structure that deal to best make sure you get the house and get the house for the terms and the price that you want? That's where I come into play. So every time Jimmy shows you a house, he's going to give me a call. He's going to let me know exactly what went down. If you like it, don't like it, maybe like it. And we're going to then reassess it from there and then plan the next day or the next time we go out. And so if they know that's the process, and when you say it that way, people are like, oh, okay, I get that. Because at the end of the day, typically the heart surgeon isn't the one who's going to greet you and walk in the front door of the medical office, right? And there's so many examples like that. I mean, the general contractor who is the guy you're hiring to build your house typically isn't the guy in there with the nail gun framing the house, or the guy hanging the drywall. He's just not. But he's going to make sure that guy who's doing the drywall is doing a good job and it's straight and it's not crooked and so on and so forth, right? So that's kind of what we are doing in this situation. So you want to leverage that piece out, continue the buyer business. The number one reason why you want to do that is because the best seller leads are buyer leads. Let me repeat that, guys. The best seller leads are buyer leads. That is correct. Why? Because as Elizabeth and I were talking here earlier, the most sellers need a place to live still, right? Mm-hmm. And unless they're have something really unique going on, which could be a relocation to a new city, and therefore they need to rent for 1 year to figure that city out, or maybe because they're up there in age and they're just going to go to some sort of home that assisted living, or maybe even they just want to rent for a while because they don't want a home ownership, or there's those reasons. But majority of them do need a place to live, and they are going to buy another house because they have home ownership already. They don't want to be a lifelong renter, and so that's the case. So when you do your needs analysis with them and you find out what they're looking for, they typically start looking at homes before they actually go through the process of wanting to sell, right? They'll go on these consumer portals. They may not know you at all, and somehow they find you along the way, whatever it is, referral, maybe you're on the consumer portal online, whatever it is. And then they go, hey, you don't know this guy at all, by the way. Hey, Kelly, 123 East Smith Street. Tell me about the house, and can I get in and see it tomorrow? And then you go through your scripts. Yeah, and you set up that time to see him, but then you ask a question along the way, something like this. Hey, Mr. Smith, if I could wave the magic wand, and this was the house you want to actually end up buying, how would this process go down? What's your ideal time frame? And that's an open question that has nothing to do with selling a house, because you can't just to a cold lead go, someone doesn't know you, go, oh, by the way, I got a house to sell. Can I come and take a look at it? I mean, you can, but you probably won't make too much money, because they'll be like, no, you're not the guy, right? Or maybe they'll say, don't worry about that. Let me just go see the house. And they'll still use to see the house, but then they don't like it. Then they will do everything they can to avoid you from there on out, right? And that stinks too, because now you have your time wasted, right? So you need to be scripted and be very thoughtful in terms of how you say things. That's one thing you can do. I love the wave the magic wand script. I love it, because then you take the paintbrush and paint this picture as to how you want to see this go down if you could do so, if you were in charge of every aspect along the way. And with that question comes out, well, we got this house to sell, or well, when we sell our house, or what, and then you're like, oh, ding, 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 ding. Now I can ask a follow-up question to that. And before you know it, you're working with them to sell their house. Now you have sold a house. Now you have credibility for the next seller when this happens. By the way, if you work on a team, you have credibility automatically, because when the team sells the house, you sell the house. Mm-hmm. That's how it works, right? You can use those statistics because you're on the team. You're part of that deal in some way or another. So that's the best way you can do it to start off with, is to leverage your buying business. Do not stop it. Continue to be the one who's nurturing those leads, because if you're out showing properties, you have less time to then nurture the leads in your database that have already inquired at some point in the past about potentially buying a house. And then those end up becoming good seller leads. Now, a couple of things to cover that you could do simultaneous to all of this is you could start a farm. That's right, a geographical farm. There are people farms, there are geographical farms. We're talking about geographical farms. You can pick an area that you want to explore and you want to do business in. There are certain things qualifications you need to have before you actually pick that farm to ensure it's going to be set up for success. Because if someone already dominates that area,
your time,
you don't waste your time. That's right. So, excuse me. That's one way you could do it. Farming. That's another way you could do it. Now, you have to be committed 12 months minimum, because you should not expect business from the first 1, 2, or 3 mailings.
Come rolling in. Yeah,
it doesn't. Yeah, it's consistency over time, which no one wants to hear, but that's the truth. Farming is a big one. Now, as you close deals, you want to work your sphere of influence. That's going to be a big one, and we have a whole system. We can continue to talk about that. Some upgrades we made to our personal system that we can talk about maybe on one of these future podcasts here as well that I'm excited about. But that's a big one that you want to do. And then the obvious ones I wrote down here that we do a lot of are actually prospecting. prospecting base will get you into working with sellers much, much faster. The two biggest sources are for sale by owners. Why? Because their house is already quote
They
unquote
already have
on
the
the
intent.
market.
Yeah.
Yeah, the intent's there. You know they want to sell. The second thing are expired/cancels. Now you could also throw the withdrawals or the temporarily off markets in there too, because sometimes agents will put TOM or withdrawn when really the client wants to be done with them. Cancel it. I'm done with you for whatever reason. And they just like, well, maybe if I just put it TOM, they'll want to come back to me and they won't get any cold calls from other agents because TOM status, no one really hits that much. And then of course they don't. So those two things. I had a coach one time when I was new in the business, when I first hired a coach, and I figured out that that's probably something you should do and spend some money on. And she goes, I go, hey, I'm having this trouble. I need more listings. And I asked this question about how do it's like we're talking about today. And she goes, if I move tomorrow and I drop me off in any city in America, what's the fastest way to get a listing? The fastest way to get it. Now, I need a now business because I don't know anybody in that city. You just drop me off. And her answer was, I call expireds. And I spent all day long as it took to get appointments and get in front of people who are expired leads. Why? Because again, intent. Their house is already in the market. And what's even better about expireds over FSBOs is because not only was their house on the market, they had already hired an agent. With an agent. They're okay paying some sort of fee for a professional to help them get their house sold. Hello, right? So that's what you do. But that comes with a lot of, fear of rejection. And it comes with a lot of not so much fun stuff to sift through a bunch of stuff to get one. But if you're committed, that's what you do. That's what you should do. Another list you can call is the absentee owner list. So in our team, we have an absentee owner list, and we have absentee owner list of 65 years of age and older. Why the first one? Well, because if they don't live in the house, it's either going to be a rental or maybe a second home. And so if that's the case, just maybe they would like to liquidate.
Right.
Maybe they'd like
Cash
to unlock
out.
their equity. Cash out. Exactly. You just don't know. Maybe they're tired of the renters just trashing their place and they're just done with it. And you come along with a phone call and they go, yeah, I mean, what do you think I get for it? Well, let me get your information. Have you done any upgrades to the property? What's the floor plan look like? I can get back to you in an hour with that information or whatever it is, right? And then you call them and then you have a chance to get that listing. Absentee owners over the age of 65 are amazing because for all the same reasons, yes, plus they're over 65. Now, if they're over 65, there's a good chance they really want to cash out.
Mm-hmm.
It could be their retirement.
Ready to retire. Yeah. It's
yes.
A lot of the time, that is the reason they got that property in the first place. So
Bingo.
They can retire on it.
They want to use that equity for retirement money or funds, and they don't want the headache anymore of it being potentially a rental, or even if it's a second home. I don't get there as much as I used to anymore. Kids are grown, whatever, and let's just get rid of it now at this point. I don't get down enough to use it. Mm-hmm. And then you're on the phone talking to them, and they go, what can I get for it? Oh, I'm glad you asked. I'd be happy to run those numbers for you, right? So that's another way to do it as well. Last but not least, I think this is the last here. I'll go. There's literally 100 different ways you can do this, guys. Are the $0 transfer list? What is that? Again, it involves texting and phone calling, right? You can mail as well, but the $0 transfer list is anytime somebody transfers the title of their company or of their house, to another entity, or from entity back to themselves, or wife to husband, husband to wife. All these different ways, and they do it for $0 because all that they're doing is transferring the name. They still own it. They still have control of it some way, some form, some fashion, but they're transferring the names. Now, why is that potentially a trigger? Because a lot of people, when they go to sell the property, they realize after all these years, they didn't have the right mechanism in order to get the correct maybe tax savings when they sell, or maybe they're getting a divorce, and so husband's deeding it to wife because she's going to keep the house, or maybe the wife's deeding to husband because she doesn't want to live there anymore because she has bad memories, and he does too. He's going to sell the house or whatever. All these different things are trigger points. That now, does it always mean someone's going to sell a house when they transfer their name of the title from entity to name, or vice versa? No, absolutely not. But it's a somewhat decent probability that it could be. So they're getting the house ready to be positioned to put it on the market to then sell. And then you come along with a phone call saying, hey, and the script would be really easy, guys, by the way. There's not like, hey, I saw you transfer the deed of your trust. No, 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 no. You just simply call and you're like, hey, Jim, how you
That'd
doing?
be
Hey, this is,
very, very, I'd be freaked out if somebody said that. They
yeah,
just called me,
you,
hey, I've been
exactly.
watching you.
Yeah, that's not, yeah, you want them to know that you know without them knowing, right? That's the key. So you just look, hey, Elizabeth, how you doing? This is Kelly Cook over here at Cook and Associates Real Estate Advisors. I have a buyer that has been looking in your neighborhood for quite some time. The stuff on the market right now, he's just not good with, but he's looking to actually pick up a home in your neighborhood. And to be told, he's an investor as well. So he was looking to buy a couple homes this year alone. Have you ever thought about possibly selling your house? And then if you say no, which is what they say most of the time, is there anyone else in your neighborhood, in your area you can think of that's looking to possibly sell your house? And then, but the reality is if Elizabeth just transferred it to an LLC or whatever, right? Because she's getting ready to sell it and that's what is recommended by, her professional attorney or whatever it is, then she might go, well, I mean, this literally happens. This literally happens, guys, where she goes, matter of fact, yeah, we are looking to sell. Your timing's fantastic here. What can I get for it? And nothing's ever said whatsoever about the $0 transfer. But I know that she did it and she knows why she's doing it, but she hasn't arranged the appropriate agent yet. They may have one or two in mind, but then you can get your hat in the ring and be part of the interview process. Get it at bat that way. So there's these creative ways you can do it. But guys, all of it takes consistency because the fact that you're going to nail or be able to pick an apple, a low-hanging fruit immediately off the bottom of the tree, probably not highly likely. They've already been picked. You got to go up the tree a little bit, which takes a little bit of time and consistency.
That's why you don't stop your buyer business, because it might take a while to get your, don't say, oh, I'm going to do listings now, not taking any buyers, because you might go without a paycheck for a little bit, but continue working with your buyers and start putting these practices into place so that you can make that transition to taking on more listings. I've got one more thing too, Kelly, that kind of ties in with our first point here, that a lot of the time buyers are sellers, especially if you've been in on the buy side for a while, for a couple of years. You probably have, hopefully a list of all those buyers that you've helped in a past client list. And this is a way that maybe not immediately, but to feed your business long term to get listings. A lot of those people that you helped buy a home, maybe their first home, at some point they probably will sell it, especially if it was their first home, right? So make sure that you do a good job on the buy side, you do really good customer service, and you stay in touch with them so that when they are ready to sell, they haven't forgotten about you. You're going to be the person they call, right? Because they already have that trust in you and you're staying in front of them. So make sure that you're planting those seeds early on when you're helping your buyers to plan for their listing, that house that you helped them buy. Plan for that listing, and make sure you're keeping in touch, throughout the years.
That's a great idea. I mean, that's working your sphere, right? You have to work your sphere, your database. Absolutely. And so it's a great reminder, Elizabeth, because people need to stay in touch. That is the old stat, right? They always say that about 88% of people say they had a great experience with their agent, some form of fashion when they use them. That was the most recent poll by the NAR, maybe it's 87%, but yet 12 to 11% of people actually use the same agent again twice for the next transaction, whenever that is in the future.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Impact and stay in front.
You just don't stay in touch. You just don't stay in, and it's easy, but we all fall prey to it because of busyness. Usually. Now, some people are just like, I'm lazy, right? I don't want to do it. But there's that too, right? But the ones who are out there working sometimes still miss, like yours truly, miss because sometimes you just get busy and you just skip over the fundamentals because you want to shoot half court shots when you should be
transaction mindset.
Yeah, it's like basketball. You want to shoot half court shots because that's cool, or maybe like the NBA threes because it's deep from three and it's really cool when it goes in. But the reality is if you just learn how to dribble with your left hand and your right hand, of course, if you're right-handed, but dribble with your opposite hand really well and pass the ball with bounce passes and chest passes when needed and like the basic stuff that aren't that cool, isn't that cool? Then the reality is you'll be very successful. It just takes a little bit of time. You have to be patient, long-term perspective on this as a career.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that was a really good one. If you, like we said, a lot of agents come into the business. Maybe you're still there where you are, and maybe you've been in the business for a while and you're still just kind of working primarily with buyers. We gave you some really good tips on how to start, getting more listings, working with more sellers, get the experience under your belt, and then hopefully more will come as you get more experience. But one of Kelly's first points was to get a buyer assistant or a showing assistant, a showing agent. And I think that might be part of a real estate team. That might be like one of your first hires if you're planning to go that way. So if you do want to continue growing that, leverage yourself out more, get more people to work with you on transactions, on management, more agents, then please go to buildyourrealestateteam.com. And Kelly has kind of laid out everything that he did there. I think the very first hire that you have laid out there is like support, like transaction or like support stuff, right? That's one of the first things. And a showing
Overall
assistant
administrative assistant.
yep,
Yes.
could fall kind of into that as well. So make sure you go download
Totally.
that guide, check that out, and start building your team and getting more listings.
Yeah, that's
Other than
right.
that, where can they reach out to you, Kelly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Have any
Oh, yeah,
questions?
absolutely. 480-227-2028 or on social media on Instagram at Kelly Cook Homes. Check us out there, guys. Or YouTube, Everything Phoenix.
Yeah. Kelly, I know we've talked about this a lot. Kelly is killing it on YouTube these days. Got tons of content coming out. So make sure that you go there for any inspiration, just to learn a little bit more about Phoenix or learn more about Kelly. Make sure you check him out there. And we will see you guys all next week.
All right, guys. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yeah. Bye, Kelly.
See ya.
Welcome to the podcast Selling Real Estate with Kelly Cook, where we will discuss the latest and most relevant business strategies to help you do one thing extremely well: sell more homes. We'll discuss everything from business planning to lead generation and conversion to past client customer service and everything in between. Join us for authentic conversations and nuts and bolts takeaways you can implement into your business today. And now, Selling Real Estate with Kelly Cook.